In the heart of Chicago, Marla Reyes ducked into an abandoned subway tunnel, her boots crunching broken glass. Above, the sky shimmered with the glow of Concorde patrol drones, sleek, silver ovals that buzzed like angry hornets. She gripped a scavenged plasma carbine taken from a downed patrol, its alien surface scorched and patched with duct tape. 3 weeks ago, she was just a black hat hacker on the run. Now she was coordinating urban sabotage stalls across North America. Her fingers flew across a cracked tablet rigged with Concorde data chips. She wasn't just dodging drones, she was infecting them. A backdoor signal burst from her uplink, hijacking 2 Concorde scouts mid-flight. Their cameras went dark. Their weapons turned inward. One crashed into the other. Primitive, ha. Suck my analog signal, Marla muttered. Half a world away, in the frozen wilds of Siberia, an old Russian cosmonaut named Dmitry Volkov launched weather balloons equipped with directional EMPs and chemical smokescreens, disrupting Concorde flight paths. He taught village kids how to use old hunting rifles to shoot down recon drones, then laughed when one boy painted a skull on his weapon and called it Sputnik's revenge. Everywhere, ordinary people did the extraordinary. Mechanics used scrap metal to build barricades. Teenagers posted attack patterns on dark web forums. Grandmothers in Seoul used kitchen pressure cookers to make makeshift bombs. It wasn't organized. It was organic. The Concorde, bred on millennia of orderly conquest, couldn't compute the chaos. Their simulations didn't account for irrational resistance from inferior species. Their neural AIs couldn't predict human unpredictability. And their command structure, so vast and bureaucratic, struggled to adapt. Back on the Valerian, Dr. Thalen Giroux paced nervously in his observation chamber. Earth's population density had dropped only slightly. Civilian surrender rates were far lower than anticipated. Drone losses were climbing. Local Concorde officers were being lured into ambushes and vanishing without trace. He opened a channel to High Command. We may have underestimated this species. Their technology is crude, yes, but they are clever, adaptive, emotionally unstable, but unified when pressured. They do not submit. They resist. Recommend tactical reassessment. But High Command didn't listen. They had subjugated species with plasma blades and mind-warping tech. Earth was nothing. They believed this uprising would burn out like a wildfire in the rain. They didn't understand that this was the rainstorm, a global storm of rage, survival instinct, and impossible defiance. In a ruined church in Mexico City, a teenage girl spray-painted across the wall beneath a shattered stained glass window. "We don't need your stars. We'll build our own." And in that moment, the resistance was no longer about survival. It became about vindication. The Battle of Denver didn't start with a bang. It started with a rumble. Colonel Elias Monroe stared out from a shattered office window, hands behind his back, as Concorde transports descended over the Colorado mountains. Their polished hulls gleamed in the morning sun like celestial blades. He didn't blink. "Contact in 60 seconds, came the voice in his earpiece. "All units ready." Monroe turned to his crew, engineers, farmers, mechanics, even a former NFL linebacker now wearing salvaged alien armor. They weren't soldiers by Concorde standards, but to Monroe, they were the sharpest edge humanity had ever forged. He leaned forward and whispered, "Show them what primitives can do." As the first wave of Concorde mechs touched down on the outskirts of Denver, the resistance let them get comfortable. The aliens moved with clinical precision, scanning structures, corralling civilians, rerouting traffic. That's when the sewers exploded. Handmade charges, built from fertilizer, alien fuel cells, and scrap copper, turned the streets into molten trenches. Sniper teams hidden in high-rises targeted Concorde officers. Radio signals jammed the drones, confusing their pathfinding algorithms. Entire platoons vanished down booby-trapped alleys. A group of teens in ski masks dumped buckets of magnetized ball bearings from rooftops. The Concorde mechs stumbled, their grav stabilizers sputtering. Then came the railguns, ugly, rusted things bolted together from car batteries and stripped down maglev rails. They screamed when fired, launching projectiles that tore through alien armor like tissue. The Concorde, expecting surrender, instead met coordinated defiance. Within 2 hours, 3 patrol ships were downed, and the rest were forced to retreat. Monroe stood in the middle of the city square, looking up at the smoking wreckage of a fallen Concorde dropship. Cameras, Earth-based and alien, captured the moment. His voice, gravel-thick and calm, echoed through the hacked Concorde channel. "We didn't ask for war. You brought it. Now you'll see what we do with gifts we didn't want." The footage went viral, not just across Earth, but across the stars. On Concorde worlds, species long thought pacified watched humans fight with awe. On labor colonies, whispers spread. The Earthlings are fighting back, and they're winning. Inside the Concorde command network, algorithms flagged the Battle of Denver as an anomaly. Losses were unacceptable. Morale drops were observed among frontline troops. Some species began requesting reassignment. Others refused to fire on humans entirely. Dr. Giroux watched the Denver footage on repeat. Monroe's calm fury disturbed him more than any weapon. "They are not tactically superior," Giroux said into his recorder, "but they are unpredictable, and they learn." In response, the Concorde doubled down. Reinforcements were dispatched. Orbital weapons platforms activated. They would burn the resistance out with overwhelming firepower. But they still didn't understand. This wasn't an insurgency. It was a spark, and the ashes were dry. The first orbital strike on Earth came down over Nairobi. White-hot beams of kinetic energy reduced entire blocks to ash in seconds. The Concorde called it surgical neutralization. Humanity called it a massacre. Thousands died. Communications blacked out. Survivors dug through craters with their bare hands, pulling charred bodies from the rubble. The world grieved, but not for long. Within days, retaliation came, not with fleets or planetary defenses, but with innovation. In an abandoned hydroelectric facility in Norway, a team of rogue engineers, once working on microfusion, created the world's first hybridized weapon. Part alien plasma, part human battery tech. It overloaded Concorde shielding systems. The prototype exploded. Only one engineer survived. But the design worked. Across continents, labs popped up in basements and bunkers. Scientists, students, and even ex-criminals shared files over encrypted networks. The blueprints were crude but effective. Concorde mechs designed for interstellar battle were suddenly vulnerable to scrapyard weapons operated by kids in sneakers and ski masks. Humans weren't catching up to alien technology. They were bending it into something the Concorde didn't recognize. In Brazil, soldiers wielded repurposed plasma cutters mounted on modified motorcycles. Dragons, they called them. In Iran, cloaks made of electromagnetic foil blocked Concorde scans, allowing snipers to melt in and out of battlefields like ghosts. In Vietnam, an entire Concorde dropship disappeared into the jungle, never seen again. It wasn't just the tech that was changing. Culture mutated. Martial arts gyms trained resistance fighters in both alien hand-to-hand and Earth's deadliest techniques. Children were taught drone sabotage as casually as math. Tattoos of fallen rebels became sacred. Music shifted. Tribal drums mixed with synthetic beats and alien distortion. New songs screamed of resistance in dozens of languages. And with every death, with every loss, humanity grew harder. Colonel Monroe stood before a gathering of resistance leaders deep in the Rocky Mountains, pointing to a crude holomap of Concorde deployments. "They can outgun us, outrun us, and outblast us," he said. "So we'll give them something they can't calculate." A silence followed. Then Marla Rice, now the Resistance's lead cyber warfare operative, grinned. "Kados." That week, Concorde systems across the globe began to crash. Civilian drones turned on their masters. Propaganda broadcasts were hijacked with footage of human victories. Conflicting orders rippled through Concorde ranks. And then, the biggest breach yet. Marla hacked a Concorde orbital uplink and downloaded partial AI schematics. The data was corrupted, but the implications were explosive. Concorde's most advanced systems weren't invincible. They had rules, patterns, and humans. Humans were born to break rules. In a hidden cave network in Kazakhstan, a new banner was raised, a jagged, improvised symbol, a human skull fused with the Concorde's metallic sigil. Below it, a message was painted in scorched black. We adapt. You die. Dr. Giroux read intercepted reports and began to question everything. If these primitives continue to evolve, they won't just survive us. They'll surpass us. Above the Indian Ocean, the Vatelon hung in orbit like a floating city, sleek, angular, and terrifying. It was the Concorde's pride, a flagship equipped with planetary bombardment arrays and a core AI that had processed the strategies of 1,000 species. It was untouchable. Until humans boarded it. The operation had no name, no medals, just a goal: take the impossible and make it ours. Derek Cho, a retired SAS operative with cybernetic limbs, led the infiltration team. 30 hand-picked specialists from 8 countries, each with nothing left to lose. Marla Rice fed them a backdoor into the Concorde's orbital blind spots. The plan: jump from an experimental stealth shuttle, latch onto the outer hull, breach the service tunnels, and infect the ship's systems from within. Simple on paper, insane in execution. They launched from an improvised railgun hidden in the Himalayas, hurtling toward orbit at Mach 8 in a capsule cobbled together from Russian scrap, Concorde alloys, and pure desperation. They lost 3 on entry, 2 more during the breach. But they got inside. The corridors of the Vatelon were eerily silent. Concorde engineers didn't anticipate interior combat. Their defenses were outward-facing, meant to repel fleets, not flesh and blood rebels crawling through ducts and maintenance shafts. Marla's virus was uploaded within minutes. The ship's AI hesitated for 2.4 seconds, enough time for Cho and his team to storm the command bridge, plasma rifles screaming. The aliens didn't expect hand-to-hand combat. They weren't trained for it. The command crew fell, stunned and horrified, as the intruders, primitive, feral, human, took control. Cho stood before the command console, blood dripping from his forearm, and opened a broadcast to every Concorde fleet, every occupied planet, every ship within range. His voice was low, clear, certain. You call us savages, but we learned your systems, hacked your AI, and took your strongest ship with 30 people and a plan drawn on a napkin. We are not your livestock. We are not your subordinates. We are your future, and we are not afraid of you. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. On occupied worlds, rebellion flared like wildfire. Enslaved species who had once resigned themselves to Concorde rule now had hope, and a blueprint. On Helion Prime, miners smashed their collars and overwhelmed guards using stolen human tactics. On Kasteri IV, a young alien named Lyra carved "Earth will rise" into his arm before detonating a power core, leveling a Concorde command post. The Vatelon was renamed the Iron Howl and became the flagship of the United Resistance Fleet. In Concorde High Command, panic spread. Dr. Giroux watched the footage of Cho's broadcast on a loop. There was no bravado, no posturing, just a quiet certainty that shook Giroux to his core. We tried to make them submit, he whispered, but we only made them strong. The fall of the Vatelon sent ripples across the galaxy, but for many, it was a signal that the Concorde could bleed. For centuries, alien species had lived under the boot of the Concorde's benevolent rule. Their cultures diluted, their languages restricted, their futures decided by bureaucrats in floating palaces. Some had forgotten how to rebel. Others had never known. But now they had a name. A word whispered in shadows, shouted in crowds, painted on walls in dripping red. Earth. On Helion Prime, mining slaves turned their drills into spears. They moved through tunnels like rats, ambushing guards and planting explosives. They had no military training, but they had watched hours of human resistance footage smuggled through the black market. When asked what made them rise now, their leader, a gray-scaled brute named Viral, growled. They fought back. So will we. On Al-Kuri Station, an orbital research hub, a group of scientists decommissioned Concorde security AIs and flooded the system with human literature. Orwell, Guevara, Mandela, Malcolm X's entire labs shut down just to read. When Concorde enforcers arrived, they were overwhelmed by bioengineered insect swarms, released by former biologists turned insurgents. All over the galaxy, the primitive tactics of humans became doctrine. They called it the Earth Doctrine. Fight dirty, think fast, never kneel. Meanwhile, aboard the Iron Howl, Earth's first interstellar command ship, the United Resistance Fleet began to grow. Defectors from former Concorde client species arrived in stolen freighters, rusty cargo haulers, and hacked Concorde ships bearing makeshift flags. They didn't come with polished uniforms or formal pledges. They came with fire. Marla Reyes oversaw the encryption network connecting 50 resistance cells across 12 planets. Each one operated autonomously. Each one had its own culture, its own scars, but they all shared one trait. They had chosen to stand. Colonel Monroe stood at the strategy table, watching the movement grow faster than he'd ever thought possible. "We don't need to win everywhere," he said. "We just need to make them doubt. Every world that rebels, that's one less boot on another." And it worked. The Concorde faltered, not from a lack of power, but from fractures within. Species once loyal began refusing deployment orders. Supplies went missing. Officers were assassinated by their own bodyguards. Civil unrest surged even on core worlds. Alien students on high-tech campuses quoted human philosophers. A once invisible empire now felt naked beneath the eyes of billions who had finally awoken. Dr. Thalen Giroux stood before the Concorde High Council, his voice weary. "We thought ourselves gods," he said, "but we created a species that refuses worship. They don't just fight with guns. They fight with ideas." The council dismissed him, but Giroux knew the truth. The galaxy wasn't watching an insurgency. It was witnessing a revolution, with Earth at its heart. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a decision. After 7 years of occupation, resistance, and galactic rebellion, the once mighty Concorde stood fractured. Their fleets were still vast, their technology unmatched, but their will to dominate had collapsed under the weight of human defiance. On the world of Virenus, the last major Concorde military command center burned in the night, not by orbital bombardment, but by the hands of the enslaved, who dragged their overseers into the streets and shouted a name foreign to their tongues. Earth. Aboard the Iron Howl, now the flagship of a coalition known as the Free Species Accord, Colonel Monroe watched the stars through the ship's panoramic bridge window. Behind him stood leaders from dozens of liberated worlds, species who had once called humans savages, now wearing fragments of Earth-style armor, quoting human leaders, flying rebel flags with crude Terran emblems sewn into them. Even now, humanity had no true fleet, no official empire. Their tech was still cobbled together. But they had influence, respect, and fear, because they had done the unthinkable. They taught the galaxy how to say no. The Concorde, unable to contain the spread of insurrection, requested an emergency negotiation. They offered peace, autonomy, power sharing. And for the first time in its history, the Galactic Concorde knelt, not to superior firepower, but to the one thing they could never engineer, the untamed, unbroken will of a species too chaotic to predict and too stubborn to die. The Peace Summit was held on Mars. Not Earth, Mars. Humanity chose the red planet for symbolic reasons. Once desolate, now blooming with oxygen farms and solar cities, Mars was proof of what humans could build from nothing. In the crimson halls of New Olympus, The Concord's surviving council bowed before the Free Species delegation. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Marla Reyes leaned in and smiled. Not so primitive now, are we? The new Galactic Charter was simple. No species would rule another. Culture was sacred. Autonomy was law. And every voice, no matter how small, had a place in the stars. Humanity didn't take the crown of the galaxy. They melted it down and used the metal to build something new. Dr. Phelan Giroux, once the Concord's leading expert on primitive species, retired to a Terran university, where he spent the rest of his life teaching alien and human students alike about what he called the defiant species. In his final lecture, he wrote on a chalkboard the words, "Greater than, they called us primitive, until we fought back. Greater than then, they called us dangerous. Greater than now, they call us leaders. Greater than, but we're still human. And that's enough." The stars had been silent for eons, ruled by order and fear. But now, they echoed with something new. Freedom, brought to them not by conquerors, but by us.